Unit 5, Chapter 8, Emergence of Nationalism in India. Introduction. Nationalism emerged in India during the 19th century. Among the various factors which developed the feelings of nationalism among Indians, the major role was played by the Western education and the English language. It was because of the Western education that the Indians had learnt about the principles of liberty, equality, and the right of the people to form their own government. The English language brought the educated Indians from different parts of the country on the same platform where they could exchange their ideas and chart out common programs to demand freedom from the British government. The background. The entry of Europeans in India started due to the revival of sea routes in the 15th century. They initially entered as traders in India but very soon started taking interest in the political affairs of India with the intention of exercising political control over the country. The British traders formed the East India Company in 1600 to intensify the trade activities, and for that they asked for concessions from the native rulers. However, the situation started becoming alarming when the British East India Company waged wars against some powerful rulers and started annexing their kingdoms. The victory in the Battle of Plassey in 1757 gave them a stronghold in the country, and the Battle of Buxar in 1764 gave them the right to collect Diwani in India from the Nawab of Bengal. Diwani is to collect revenue in the form of taxes from Bengal, Bihar and Orissa provinces. Okay, now this began the economic exploitation of India. However, the discontent among the people started flaring up because of the economic exploitation, policy of racial supremacy, interference in the religious affairs of political domination. All these factors resulted in a major revolt against the company's rule in 1857, which was called as the First War of India's Independence. The revolt was brutally suppressed by the British, and the Queen's Proclamation of 1859 brought the administration in India under the aegis of Queen Victoria of England. With this, the rule of the British East India Company in India came to an end. During the period from 1858 to 1855, the feelings of Indian nationalism were being generated among the Indians who were becoming conscious of their economic and political exploitation. There emerged a group of middle-class young men who believed in using violent methods to achieve independence. These revolutionaries founded a number of secret organizations, managed to get arms, published newspapers in foreign countries, etc. In 1879, Vasudev Balwant Phadke staged an uprising against the British rule. On 22nd June 1897, another revolutionary, Damodar Chaphekar, shot W.C. Rand, who was the plague commissioner of Pune. For this, he was sentenced to death by the British government. Simultaneously, during this period, a number of provincial organizations in the different provinces were established, whose demands were of a national character. They prepared the background for the creation of national associations, and that was the Indian National Congress. Formation of Indian National Congress. The first political party at the national level was the Indian National Congress, which was formally established on 28 December 1885 at Bombay. The first president of the party was Vomesh Chandra Banerjee, and the first secretary was a Goan, Kashinath Trimbak Telang, popularly known as K.T. Telang. Allen Octavian Hume, a retired civil servant, had played a key role on its foundation. It gave a new hope to the Indians of reviving the freedom movement in India by bringing the people from the different provinces together. It was a forum to deliberate on different issues and give suggestions to the British government. Phases of freedom movement. India's freedom struggle can be broadly divided into 3 phases. The first phase from 1885 to 1905, called the Era of the Moderates. The second phase from 1905 to 1920, called as the Era of the Extremists. And then the third phase from 1920 to 1947, called as the Gandhian Era. So now we talk about Era of the Moderates, 1985 to 1905. This was a period when the leaders of the party such as Vomesh Chandra Banerjee, Surendranath Banerjee, Justice Ranade, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Firoz Shah Mehta, Pandit Motilal Nehru and others had adopted constitutional and peaceful methods to put forward their various demands, including that of Swaraj. The leaders sent their demands in the form of memorandum, written petitions and appeals. Thus, this period was called as the period of petition politics. Dissatisfied with this, the revolutionaries continued their activities. In 1904, one of the prominent revolutionary who had the experience of revolutionary activity in India, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, popularly known as Swatantravir Savarkar, founded the Abhinav Bharat to guide the revolutionaries. The work of the revolutionaries was carried out mostly from Bengal and Maharashtra. Some of the other revolutionaries were Shyamji Krishna Verma, Senapati Bapat, Khudiram Bose and Prafulla Chaki. The methods of the moderates proved to be ineffective because their demands were not met by the British government. Instead of granting liberties, the British Viceroy Lord Curzon brought about the partition of Bengal in 1905 under the pretext that Bengal was too large a province to be effectively administered. But the real intention was to follow the policy of divide and rule to separate the Hindus and Muslims. This triggered off differences among the Congress leaders because moderates still had the faith in the British government, whereas the extremists were convinced that they have to fight for their demands and not plead for it. Finally, in 1905, the Indian National Congress split at the Surat session, and this led to the second stage of the freedom struggle, which is called as the Era of Extremists. Era of the Extremists, 1905 to 1920. The extremists were mainly led by Bipin Chandra Pal, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, popularly known as Lal Bal Pal. But the influence of Tilak was dominant. The year 1905 was starting point of extremist policies in the Indian politics. It strengthened the extremist ideology of the freedom struggle. It grew among the younger generations of the Congress party who were unhappy with the moderates' policy of 3 Ps: petitions, protests and prayers. They wanted to follow more aggressive methods and were of the strong belief that Swaraj had to be demanded and not pleaded. It was at this time that Lokmanya Tilak said that Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. They made the Indians aware of the glorious past and thus developed self-respect among them. They used Swadeshi and boycott as effective weapons against the British rule. Tilak started public celebration of Shivaji festival and Ganesh festival to bring the masses together and spread the feelings of nationalism among them. They started the spread of national education to sow the seeds of nationalism by creating a sense of pride in one's own nation. They also started a number of newspapers to spread the ideas. Maratha and Kesari was started by Tilak. New India by Bipin Chandrapal and Bande Mataram by Aurobindo Ghosh. The influence of Tilak was dominant during this phase. It is said that he laid the foundations of mass participation in the freedom struggle. He also participated in the Home Rule movement along with N. Besant. Gandhiji had rightly called Tilak as the maker of modern India. It was during the second phase that in 1906, Muslim League was formed, which was worked in close cooperation with the British government. Along with the policy of divide and rule and repression, British used political reforms to appease the moderates and the Muslims and passed the Morley-Minto reforms in 1905, which increased the number of seats in legislatures and provided for separate electorates for Muslims. From 1905 to 1911, there was a lull in the Indian freedom struggle because most of the extremist leaders were arrested by the British government. In 1919, Montague-Chelmsford reforms was passed, by which a limited part of the provincial administration was handed over to Indians. Dairaki was introduced in India. This did not please the extremist leaders who decided to continue the struggle. In the meanwhile, British government continued with repressive policies and passed the Rowlatt Act, known as the Black Act, which authorized British officers to arrest anyone on suspicion and imprison them without trial. This led to a nationwide protest. Gandhiji called for an all-India hartal. The response was overwhelming. Towns and villages in every part of the country participated. On 13th April 1919, Jallianwala Bagh massacre took place when people had gathered to protest peacefully. The Jallianwala Bagh was an open enclosure surrounded by buildings. An estimated number of 15,000 to 20,000 people had gathered for a meeting. Brigadier General Reginald E. H. Dyer and his men opened fire without any warning. People were killed in hundreds and many were crushed in the stampede. Curfew was imposed following the firing, and so no medical aid could be provided. This incident exposed the inhuman side of British rule and gave rise to the non-cooperation movement throughout the nation. On 1st August 1920, Tilak passed away, and this marked the end of the era of the extremists. Gandhian Era, 1920 to 1947. The British government in India had little sympathy for the Indian aspirations. Two factors agitated the Indian minds: the hostile attitude of the British government towards the Indian demand for self-government and the aggression of the European powers against the Muslim powers in international politics. The situation in the early 20th century was not too encouraging in India. The leaders in the Indian National Congress were looking for revival and consolidation of the movement. Gandhiji's entry into the Indian politics changed the very model of struggle for freedom. Gandhiji introduced the concepts of Satyagraha, non-violence or ahimsa, and non-cooperation in the Indian freedom struggle. He returned from South Africa in 1915, where he had successfully fought against racism with the weapon of Satyagraha. He always believed in the principle of be the change you want to see. The policy of Satyagraha laid emphasis on the power of truth and non-violence. On his arrival in India, he launched the Satyagraha at Champaran in Bihar and at Ahmedabad and Kheda districts of Gujarat. He inspired the peasants to struggle against the oppressive plantation system and the workers to fight for their share in the profits. The Khilafat question. The Caliph of Turkey was the religious head of the Muslims all over the world. After the First World War, an insulting Treaty of Sevres was imposed on Turkey, which belonged to the group of countries who suffered defeat. This led to the disintegration of Turkish Empire. The Muslims all over the world were greatly enraged, and the Muslims in India formed the Khilafat committee to protest against the British government in India. The prominent leaders of this committee were Maulana Muhammad Ali, Maulana Shaukat Ali, Hasrat Mohani, and Hakim Ajmal Khan. The committee accepted Gandhiji's proposal of non-violent, non-cooperation movement against the British government. Thus, the Muslims in India participated in the non-cooperation movement, and it was called as the Khilafat non-cooperation movement. Gandhiji launched this movement on 1st of August 1920. The features of the movement were as follows. A. Not to cooperate with the British in the functioning of the government. B. To boycott the government courts and set up tribunals for administering justice. C. To boycott the government-aided schools and colleges and establish national educational institutions. D. To boycott foreign goods and in their place use Swadeshi goods. E. To boycott the elections to the provincial legislatures. And F. To prohibit drinking of liquor. In accordance with the non-cooperation movement, prominent lawyers like C. R. Das, Motilal Nehru and C. Rajgopalachari boycotted the government courts. Students boycotted their schools and colleges, and national educational institutions were set up where the teachers worked for low wages. The students from Aligarh University formed a national educational institute called Jamia Millia Islamia. Subhash Chandra Bose resigned from the Indian Civil Service and took up office as the principal of National College in Calcutta. Boycott of the foreign goods and bonfires were arranged everywhere to burn the foreign cloths. Withdrawal of the non-cooperation movement. In February 1922, the police opened fire on an unarmed crowd at Chauri Chaura in the district of Gorakhpur in UP. The people were enraged and they set the police station on fire. As a result, 22 policemen along with an officer were burnt alive. Gandhiji realized that the movement had taken a violent turn and thus he called off the movement. On the other hand, some of the Congress leaders wanted to participate in the elections to the provincial legislatures formed by the Government of India Act of 1919. They were of the opinion that non-violence and Satyagraha were not the only methods of fighting against the British government. The British government was to be opposed from within. Thus, the Swaraj Party was formed in 1922. Leaders like Chittarajan Das, Motilal Nehru, Madan Mohan Malviya, N.C. Kelkar and others were elected to the central legislature. Simon Commission 1927. Towards the late 1920s, two factors influenced Indian politics. Firstly, the British government appointed a commission under the chairmanship of Sir John Simon in 1927 to review the nationalistic developments in India. Secondly, the impact of economic depression of 1929, which brought a decline in the agricultural prices. As a result, exports declined and the peasants found it difficult to pay their revenue. The Simon Commission had no Indian as a member and all its members were British. This was resented by the Indians, and so when the members of the commission landed in India, they were greeted with the slogan, "Simon, go back." Both the Congress and the Muslim League participated in it. There were protests throughout the nation, and at the procession at Lahore, Lala Lajpat Rai was brutally lathi-charged by the police and he succumbed to his injuries. Lalaji was often considered as the symbol of power, and Gandhiji had remarked that as long as the sun shines in the Indian sky, persons like Lalaji will not die. The young revolutionary leader Bhagat Singh from Punjab vowed to avenge the death of Lalaji. He was a member of the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association. Chandrasekhar Azad was another revolutionary leader. Bhagat Singh also led the Navjawan Bharat Sabha. Bhagat Singh threw a bomb in the assembly to make the quote-unquote deaf British hear. He also killed John Saunders, the British officer, mistaking him for the man who was responsible for the death of Lala Lajpat Rai. Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, Rajguru Sukhdev, Prafulla Chaki, Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan, Suraj Sen, Khudiram Bose were some of the revolutionaries who believed in violent action to achieve their singular goal of freeing their motherland from the clutches of the British rule. The names of some of the brave women who had participated in the revolutionary activities such as Kalpana Datta, Beena Das, Preeti Latta Wadedar, Suniti Chowdhury, Shanti Ghose cannot be forgotten. Madam Bikaji Kama was a great lady freedom fighter in the early years of our freedom struggle to unfurl our Indian flag at Stuttgart in Germany for the first time. The demand for complete independence. The Indian National Congress Party held its annual session at Lahore in 1929. This session was an important one because the mantle of Congress leadership was passed from father Motilal Nehru to the son Jawaharlal Nehru, and a resolution demanding Purna Swaraj was passed. It was decided that 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as Independence Day to prepare the people to fight against the British imperialism. This session demonstrated the determination and enthusiasm of the people. The Congress also passed a resolution of civil disobedience. The non-cooperation movement had failed to achieve its two major objectives: reinstitution of Turkish Caliphate and the attainment of Swaraj. However, there was a general awakening of the masses towards their political rights. They lost complete faith in the functioning of the British government and looked upon the Congress to liberate the country from foreign yoke. Civil Disobedience Movement. The civil disobedience movement differed from the non-cooperation movement. The non-cooperation movement tried to stop the working of the British government by not cooperating with the administrations. The civil disobedience movement aimed to paralyze the administration by performing various illegal activities. In the Lahore session of the Congress, full powers were given to Gandhiji to launch a mass movement. Mahatma Gandhi gave it the form of civil disobedience movement. But before launching the movement, Gandhiji had put forward a number of demands to the British government, such as abolition of salt tax, prohibition of liquor, and to end the monopoly of the British government to manufacture salt. But the government rejected all these demands. Gandhiji therefore decided to start a countrywide Satyagraha by breaking the Salt Act. The Dandi March 1930. Salt was an essential commodity and was consumed by both the rich and the poor. The British government had a monopoly in its production and it had also imposed a tax on it. Therefore, on 12th March 1930, Gandhiji, along with his followers, began his 385 kilometers march from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi on the seashore in Gujarat to break the Salt Act. On his way to Dandi, Gandhiji addressed the people in different villages. He called upon the people to join the civil disobedience movement fearlessly. On 5th April 1930, Gandhiji picked up a fistful of salt and broke the Salt Act. The whole country was electrified with the news. The Salt Satyagraha was launched on the other sea beaches in Maharashtra, Orissa, Gujarat and Madras. Swiftly, the law-breaking movement swept across the country. In the interior parts of the country, people violated the forest laws. Women also took part in the Satyagraha in large numbers. Sarojini Naidu, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyaya, Kamala Nehru, Sucheta Kriplani were some of them. The reaction of the British government was in the form of arrests on a large scale, forcibly confiscation of illegally collected salt, banning of the meetings and processions, lathi charge and firing. Demonstrations and firing followed in which hundreds were killed and wounded. Repression was intensified. On the night of 4th May 1930, Gandhiji was arrested. A new dimension was added to the excitement which prevailed in the land. Salt making, salt peddling, courting arrests, forcible breaking of meetings, shootings, confiscations were the order of the day. Hindus as well as Muslims like Abbas Tyabji and Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was the organizer of the volunteer corps Khudgai Khidmatgars in northwest India, also joined the movement. The masses in the towns and villages, workers and peasants responded with vigor. Women, young and old, came out in large numbers to face the wrath of the British government. The revolutionaries in Bengal raided the Chittagong armories under Surya Sen. Many were killed. The peaceful Satyagrahis were attacked. Women and children were beaten and about 10,000 people were arrested. The situation was once again turning grave. To avoid any further violence, Mahatma Gandhi once again decided to call off the movement and entered into a pact with Viceroy Lord Irwin on 5th March 1931. Gandhiji was invited to participate in the Round Table Conference in London to discuss the constitutional reforms for India. Gandhiji attended only the second Round Table Conference but returned disappointed with the discussions and talked about resuming the civil disobedience movement. In January 1932, the British government struck once again by arresting Gandhiji and other Congress leaders and declaring the Indian National Congress as an illegal organization. However, the civil disobedience movement gained more popularity and a large number of persons were arrested. The years 1928 to 1934 had brought about great change in the Congress movement by giving it greater unity, self-confidence, pride, and determination. The Congress had made the freedom struggle a movement of the masses. The result of the civil disobedience movement and the Round Table Conference was the passing of the Government of India Act of 1935, which had laid the foundation of democracy by recognizing the principle of elections. The Quit India movement. In order to get India's support for the Second World War, the British Prime Minister sent Sir Stafford Cripps to India in March 1942 to carry out negotiations with the Indian leaders. The Cripps mission plan suggested dominion status, formation of Constituent Assembly after the war, freedom for the provinces and princely states to join or not to join the federation. The Congress rejected the proposal because the freedom given to the provinces as well as the princely states would sow the seeds of the future participation in India. In addition to this, instead of complete independence, the proposals provided for dominion status. At the same time, the power would come to Indians only after the war. Gandhiji described this as a post-dated check on a sinking bank. It was opposed by the Muslim League also, as there were no provisions for the formation of Pakistan. After the failure of the Cripps mission, there was a feeling of frustration among all the sections of the people. Thus, Gandhiji now started his campaign for the orderly withdrawal of the Great Britain from India. The Congress Working Committee on 14 July 1942 passed a resolution demanding the withdrawal of the British power from India. On 8 August 1942, the Quit India resolution was passed. Gandhiji gave the masses the slogan of "Do or die." He also urged the people to prepare themselves for sacrifices to achieve India's independence. In the early morning of 9th August 1942, the British administration arrested Gandhiji, Jawaharlal Nehru, Maulana Azad and other Congress leaders of the Congress Working Committee. As many leaders were arrested, the people assumed the leadership and continued the movement. They resorted to hartals and demonstrations. Students boycotted schools and colleges, and workers went on a strike. People attacked the government properties. At many places, the government treasuries were looted. At places like Satara and Mednipur, parallel governments were set up to challenge the British authority. This uprising spread even to the villages. More than 90,000 people were arrested. The British government used cruel methods to suppress the Indians. Demonstrators were fired upon. The imprisoned demonstrators were subjected to severe harassment. A ban was imposed on the press. Hundreds of people were killed and many were injured in the police firing. Some Congress leaders gave a slip to the administration, went underground and continued the movement. Jaya Prakash Narayan led the underground movement. Other leaders included Achyut Rao Patwardhan, Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, Aruna Asaf Ali, Usha Mehta, and others. Aruna Asaf Ali operated the underground movement during the Quit India and gave updates on the secret radio network which was started by the group of underground revolutionaries. They resorted to secretly operating the radio stations, destroying transport and communication system, and other such activities. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was one of the important leaders of the Indian National Congress. Due to his differences with the Congress leaders, he quit and formed the Forward Bloc in 1939. He inspired the people with the slogans of Chalo Delhi and Tum mujhe khoon do, main tumhe azadi dunga. That means give me blood and I will give you freedom. He led the Indian National Army or Azad Hind Fauj to carry on the fight with the Britishers. The Indian National Army had inspired the Indian people and the Indian soldiers in the British Army to fight for their independence. In 1945, the British had realized that India's demand for independence can no longer be neglected. Thus, in 1946, British Prime Minister Clement Attlee sent the cabinet mission to India. This mission submitted plan according to which it had suggested the formation of an All India Federation and Indian representatives to prepare a constitution. But this plan was not acceptable to Muslim League because it did not accept their demand of separate Pakistan. It was decided to observe 16th August 1946 as Direct Action Day. Amidst the violence which erupted, Lord Wavell announced the formation of an interim government on 2nd September 1946 with Congress members alone and with Jawaharlal Nehru as its head. It was in March 1947 that Lord Mountbatten was appointed as the Viceroy and the responsibility of transferring the political powers was given to him. On 3rd June 1946, the Mountbatten Plan was announced by him. This plan had suggested independence to a divided India. India would be divided into India and Pakistan, freedom to Indian princely states to join either one of them or to remain independent. Indian National Congress unwillingly accepted the partition as it had always wanted freedom for a united country. The British Parliament passed the Indian Independence Act on 18 July 1947, granting independence to a divided India. The struggle was successful when at the stroke of midnight of 14th August 1947, the political power was transferred to India. Jawaharlal Nehru became the first Prime Minister of independent India, and the Union Jack was replaced with the Indian tricolour. India became a republic on 26 January 1950 when the Indian Constitution came into force and Dr. Rajendra Prasad became the first president.